Welcome back to Whole Bible Study with your host, me, Taddy Noy. Now we've been walking together through the book of Leviticus, which has so far brought us into the world of Israel's priesthood, sacrificial system, and the holiness code that undergirds Israel's life before God. In the opening chapters, we explored the offerings, burnt, grain, peace, sin, and guilt offerings, each designed to maintain and restore the relationship between Israel and their God. Then, in chapters 8 and 9, we saw the ordination of Aaron and his sons into the priesthood, a solemn and powerful moment of consecration. Chapter 9 culminated in God's fiery approval, consuming the offering in the altar, and the people falling on their faces in awe. It was a moment of triumph and reassurance. God's presence was with Israel, and the priesthood had been established. The joy of that moment, however, sets the stage for what comes next, because the narrative now shifts abruptly from celebration to tragedy. This is where we are in the story so far. Israel freshly consecrated, the priesthood just inaugurated, and God's glory visibly dwelling among the people. Now let's do our live reading of Leviticus chapter 10. Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense, and they offered on unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Moses then said to Aaron, quote, "This is what the Lord spoke of when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will show myself holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored.'" Aaron remained silent. Moses summoned Mishael and Elizaphan, sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Come here, carry your cousins outside the camp, away from the front of the sanctuary." So they came and carried them, still in their tunics, outside the camp, and as Moses ordered. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not let your hair become unkempt, and do not tear your clothes, or you will die, and the Lord will be angry with the whole community. But your relatives, all the house of Israel, may mourn for those the Lord has destroyed by fire. But do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting, or you will die, because the Lord's anointing oil is on you." So they did as Moses said. And the Lord said to Aaron, "You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. You must distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean, and you must teach the Israelites all the decrees the Lord has given them through Moses." Moses said to Aaron and his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, "Take the grain offering and left over from the offerings made to the Lord by fire, and eat it prepared without yeast beside the altar, for it is most holy. Eat it in a holy place, because it is your share and your son's share of the offerings made to the Lord by fire. For so I have been commanded, but you and your sons and your daughters may eat the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. Eat them in a ceremonially clean place. They have been given to you and your children as your share of the Israelites' fellowship offerings. The thigh that was presented and the breast that was waved must be brought with the fat portions of the offerings made by fire, to be waved before the Lord as a wave offering. This will be the regular share for you and your children, as the Lord has commanded. When Moses inquired about the goat of the sin offering and found that it had been burnt up, he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and asked, "Why didn't you eat the sin offering in the sanctuary area? It is most holy. It was given to you to take away the guilt of the community by making atonement for them before the Lord. Since its blood was not taken into the holy place, you should have eaten the goat in the sanctuary area as I commanded." And Aaron replied to Moses, "Today they sacrifice their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, but such things as this have happened to me. Would the Lord have been pleased if I had eaten the sin offering today?" When Moses heard this, he was satisfied. All right. Well, in today's message, we step into one of the most sobering stories in all of Torah. Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, offer what the text calls an unauthorized fire, or sometimes translated as strange fire, before the Lord. The response is immediate and devastating. Fire comes out from the presence of God and consumes them. This abrupt judgment has left interpreters across the centuries wrestling with questions of holiness, divine justice, and responsibilities of sacred leadership. To unpack this, we need to turn not only to the text itself, but also to the voices of rabbinic tradition, later Jewish and Christian interpreters, and the cultural world of the ancient Near East. The rabbis of the Midrash and the Talmud reflect deeply on this story, often focusing on what might have motivated Nadab and Abihu. Some traditions describe them as being overcome with religious fervor, their passion burning brightly, but without grounding in God's instruction. Others suggest their fault was more technical. Perhaps they drew near to the divine presence without authorization, or perhaps they used fire that had not come from the altar, drawing instead from an ordinary source. The Hebrew phrase used in the text, esh zahara, literally means foreign or alien fire, which implies that it was profane in its origin, not sanctified for use in the tent of meeting. Talmudic sources even describe the manner of their deaths with vivid imagery, saying that two fiery threads shot forth from the Holy of Holies and entered their nostrils, killing them while leaving their priestly garments intact. This detail emphasizes that their death was not ordinary, but an extraordinary divine act that struck at the very breath of life. The rabbis also explore the possibility that Nadab and Abihu had been drinking before performing their duties. Immediately after their deaths, God gives the commandment that priests should not drink wine when they enter the tent of meeting. Many sages took this as a direct indication that intoxication may have impaired their judgment, making them careless with sacred duties. Another line of rabbinic thought suggests that the problem lie in their independence. The text, the text says each of them took his own censer, which some traditions read as a sign that they acted alone, without consultation, without deference to one another or to Moses and Aaron, and without waiting for God's explicit command. Acting on their own authority was itself an affront to the sanctity of the divine order. The rabbis also linger on Aaron's response. After Moses speaks, the enigmatic words, quote, "Through those who come near me, I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be honored," unquote. Aaron remains silent. The Hebrew verb here is vayadim, carries the sense of heavy, stunned stillness. The Midrashim interpret Aaron's silence in multiple ways. Some see it as a sign of grief, too deep for words, while others praise it as a form of profound submission and faith, a silence that acknowledges God's holiness even in the face of personal loss. Later Jewish commentators such as Rashi take Moses' words to mean that God sanctifies himself through the judgment of those closest to him, and that Aaron's silence was rewarded because he accepted God's decree without protest. Other medieval commentators like Nahmanides suggest that Nadab and Abihu may have failed to observe some detail of priestly vestments, or misunderstood an earlier command about incense. In the mystical tradition, their deaths are sometimes interpreted symbolically. Some Hasidic writers describe their offering of strange fire as an act of unrestrained spiritual yearning, a desire to ascend too far into the divine presence without anchoring that passion in obedience and balance. In this view, the danger was not that they lacked love for God, but that their zeal consumed them when it was not ordered by divine instruction. Beyond Jewish tradition, later Christian interpreters also engaged this passage as a warning against irreverence. Some early church fathers read the deaths of Nadab and Abihu as a reminder that worship must be offered only as God has revealed, not according to human innovation. In Protestant traditions, especially within Reformed theology, theologians like R.C. Sproul have pointed to this story as underscoring God's absolute holiness and the seriousness of even small deviations from his commands. In Christian thought, Nadab and Abihu often serve as cautionary figures, reminding believers that drawing near to God requires both reverence and obedience, not just passion or ritual. Looking outward to the ancient Near East, we can see how this story fits into a broader cultural patterns. In Mesopotamian temple rituals, incense was prepared according to the exact recipes, with rules about the source of the fire and the manner of offering. To deviate from these instructions was not just an error, but a dangerous act that could threaten the cosmic order. Ugaritic texts also describe fire as a divine element, both life-giving and destructive. Within this context, the narrative in Leviticus 10 resonates with cultural understanding that the divine realm is perilous and that priests stand on the threshold of immense power. Israel's story, however, sharpens this by making God's presence immensely personal. Fire from God can consume an offering as a sign of approval, as it did in Leviticus 9, but it can also consume the priests themselves when they act presumptuously. Even within the biblical chapter itself, we see how this incident reshaped priestly life. Aaron and his surviving sons are commanded not to display public mourning by tearing garments or disheveling their hair, because their role as mediators of holiness takes precedence. The community as a whole may mourn, but the priests must uphold their sanctified duties. This feels harsh to modern readers, but within the priestly worldview, it was a way of showing that God's holiness consumes every part of their lives, even their grief. Later in the chapter, Moses becomes angry when Aaron's remaining sons do not eat the sin offering as prescribed. But Aaron explains that after such a tragedy, it would not have been right for him. Moses accepts this answer, and here we see that even in the midst of rigid ritual law, there is room for the reality of human experience and sorrow. Through all these traditions and interpretations, certain themes emerge. The story is about boundaries and authority. God sets the terms of holiness, and no priest, however exalted, can bypass them. It is about passion and form together, Zeal without obedience leads to destruction. It is about divine holiness that is both near and transcendent, inviting intimacy but demanding reverence. It is also about grief and faith, as Aaron's silence reminds us that sometimes the deepest response to loss is not words, but a humbled heart. And it is about communal teaching. Nadab and Abihu's deaths became a memorial lesson for generations, shaping the identity of Israel for reinforcing the seriousness of the covenant. Well, thank you for joining today's study. These stories are not easy, but they are meant to shape us, to teach us humility before the mystery of God's holiness, and to remind us that sacred things are not to be taken lightly. May this reading challenge us to honor the spaces and relationships in our own lives that are holy, even when we don't fully understand them. If this speaks to you, leave a note or share it with a friend, and we'll see you in the next chapter tomorrow.